even with my research, what I was coming across too is it seems like bisexuality in itself is like an additional spectrum, almost like a spectrum within a spectrum. So like from more of like the theoretical slash academic side, I did a little bit of research. Are either of you familiar with like the Kinsey scale or the Klein sexual orientation grid? Okay. So like what are your thoughts on that in terms of helping people identify, like if they are bisexual or not, or even just understanding how it's not a binary approach. It is much more of a spectrum in itself to say, you could lean one way for physicality, another way for romanticism, so on and so forth.
I think whatever gives you your introduction, because as Leia keeps saying, like we are limited in our words. Something that a phrase that my students have taught me is that language is limited and limiting.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And so I think though, whatever is your introduction, like, to finding that affirmation is good. And then you may discover later that that whatever that theory is, like for me as an academic, theory meant a lot for me. Like being able to understand what racial identity formation theories and sexual identity racial theories and gender for identity formation, like these things meant a lot to me. And I taught a workshop one time at UNLV called At the Intersection of Black and Queer. And we looked at those identity formation theories and how you can move through them, you can move back. And the Kinsey scale was one of those that we talked about. And I think each theorist is saying something similar, but they're also saying something different. And so finding one where you read it and you're like, that's me. That made sense for me, I think is a beautiful introduction. And you can build upon that through your own research and your own lived experience. So however you find that aha moment, because we know that these theories are also flawed. Like they're not all encompassing.
Right.
And so
they're supposed to be though too, because they're always supposed to be dynamic and ever changing. So. Exactly.
And so you may find that one works for you in the beginning. Because I even did one. I taught theories on heterosexual identity formation and then queer identity formation. And if it works for you in the beginning and then you realize that later on that it wasn't enough for you, that's cool too, because there's many other theories and you never know, you might make the theory up yourself. And that's literally how these things happen. That's how it's worked. So I have problems with Kinsey for like other reasons. I mean, I have problems with all white men. So
sorry, Cody.
No. Love you, Cody.
Cody's my man's $100,000. But
to quote Mickey Mobley, Captain America is the only white man we can trust, and the one that tells us to cross the street.
Is America's ass. So I mean.
There was some controversy with that statement.
Yeah, sorry if that triggered you, but it is true. And some white people just need to admit it. They're afraid.
Thanks for having my back.
But to kind of piggyback off of what Mickey is saying, again, it's just a lot of growth, honestly. Like you have to start somewhere. So if theory helps you to kind of figure out what makes sense for you in your identity and help you recenter and feel comfortable in your skin, by all means, use theory. But also continue learning, continue growing, continue researching. That is all what life is about. At this point, I'm kind of just standing here like, okay, my life is basically a research paper at this point. So if the Kinsey scale helps you, by all means use it, but know that there are other ways to look at your own sexuality and look at your own growth and your own life through different spectrums and different lenses, if you will.
Definitely, because I think it is important to think about like cultural state, like how culture impacts that. So you have to look at the intersections of all of who you are as a person, because no person is just one single thing.
And identity is a very fluid thing. So who you are today may not be who you are tomorrow, next month, next year. And the theories that you ascribe to today may not fit you in a year. the theories themselves tend to be kind of a little stagnant because they're an example of what it was like for those people at that time. And you also have to look at who was studied for the thing. Because with a lot of these theories from like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s that like started this whole wave of diversifying the identity theories, they were often done with white men, just white college students, because that was the easily accessible sample size. And so that's part of the reason why we have all these identity theories coming out for Black individuals, LGBT, Asian Pacific Islander, all these things like that, because not one theory is going to encompass everything, and not one theory is going to speak to every particular part of your identity.
Yeah, I like that. Because honestly, the one thing I noticed too is like a lot of times with society as we're developing, we always try to get closer and closer to that one size fits all kind of scenario. But from a theoretical perspective, it's actually counterintuitive because nothing in this life is meant to fit all. Like, we are diverse in so many different ways. And the limiting factor of that, it takes away the true meaning of identity and purpose, in my opinion. Like, one thing that I learned about when I really started understanding like identity and uniqueness, there was a episode of the Fairly Oddparents, if y'all remember that, if y'all are Nick babies. There was an episode where Timmy was getting bullied for being different, and he wished the entire world were gray blobs. And so for me, as a kid, I was like, oh, okay, that's funny, ha ha ha. But then when I look back on like the message behind it, because at one instance, even though they were exactly the same, that was his wish. Like everyone is exactly the same, gray and blobs. Somebody took it upon themselves to say, I'm the grayer blob, or I'm the blobbiest of the blobs. And from that instant, and this kind of ties into what Mickey was saying earlier about labels, it's like there was an aspect where the labeling was helping to identify, to provide uniqueness, but also in a way to, lead towards exclusion and hatred.
To
And
other
so,
people.
what was that?
To make someone feel like they're other. Like instead of you being part of my group, you're part of the other group.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting looking at it from like a adult's perspective now, how that message kind of resonated with me and kind of allowed me to understand all the different perspectives that we have like within life. Because like as Cody and myself identify as like heterosexual, cisgendered, it's like we're still open to learning more about bisexuality, homosexuality, and everything in between, like on the spectrum. So like in terms of the labeling itself, like how does that affect each of you? Like, do you feel like it's more welcoming, or do you feel like it's more, it creates more dissonance between you and whatever communities you identify with or gravitate towards?
That's kind of a double-edged sword with that type of question you got there. But I guess, and also a double-edged when it comes to those labels, because as humans, as you know, we like to put things into boxes, into categories. So we try to make sense by putting labels on. And that can be both helpful, but also at the same time, not so helpful, because then you get into the realm of trying to figure out, okay, how do I break this label to become this label? And so kind of like how Mickey, and we're just going to continue circling back, terms are always going to be problematic. And it's really just a matter of kind of defining what you want from that term and what that label means to you. For me, bisexuality means that I love people, and I will continue identifying as bisexual because I know that there are still people out there who identify as bisexual, but often are ostracized or seen as promiscuous. They're seen as less than. And no hate to any of the other terms, but that is what made sense for me. And that's why I continue to push for the plight of bisexual people.
I would say that when you get to label yourself, there's a freedom in that. When someone else labels you, then there is a it could be oppressive, like because you had no choice. Someone took away your choice to how you get to identify. I would say in my youth, because I'm still young. And the ages, like I would say from about the ages of 18 to 25, that is when maybe like 26, that is when I identified as bi. At around the age of 27 to now, which is, only 2 years ago, I started identifying as queer because I understand that my identity in terms of sexuality and my gender identity is fluid. Even now, as of recently, I've started using they pronouns because I'm really exploring, what does being non-binary mean for me? And it's still very new. So that's why I consider myself queer, because I know that I'm going to change, because I embrace the different facets of myself.
Right.
Just got off the clock, just got on my chill. Called on my homie Brent to see what be the deal. What you trying to do? I'm just trying to heal. Hella floated, never bloated's what I'm trying to feel. Hop in the whip and